Stories have been told and shared throughout history all over the world. Whether 'twas to try to bring understanding to natural events, tell the legends of great heroes, teach lessons, or simply to entertain, human history is filled with story after story. That is something that is shared between the East and the West. But when you look at them a little closer, you can begin to see many differences. In this two-part series, I will go over those differences, starting with the differences sprung from the unique cultures and other general stuff, going into the very ways the two regions structured their stories. But before I jump into it, I feel I should say that this is East and West, not East versus West. One is not better than the other, and if you actually look at more modern stories, a lot of what I'm going to talk about is actually utilized by both regions, which I would argue is a very good thing. But without a further ado, let's get started. Now, to begin, the first thing most people would probably notice are the differences of culture. There are obviously the very noticeable differences seen in architecture, physical features, etc., but that's not at all what I'm looking for. The things I'm more interested in are the features that have more of an effect on the actual storytelling part with plot and character, as opposed to just looking different. Because if you want to see those, you probably don't need my help. Anyways, due to contrast of many factors such as terrain, religion, and philosophy, there are some pretty big effects seen on how the two regions deal with character. Within storytelling, character can be roughly summed up as acting and reacting. How the hero reacts to the villain's dastardly plan, the actions the villain takes to accomplish his dastardly plan, and the different ways the supporting cast acts to assist the hero. Characters are constantly acting and reacting to both the world around them and to other characters. Well, that of course begs the question. What are the different ways Eastern and Western characters act and react? Well, for starters, Eastern countries tend to place a distinct respect on those who are older and more experienced. The West, on the other hand, is more youth-oriented and may generally view old people with a bit more contempt. A good example of the East respect is how the Japanese address each other. A very common term used over there in Japan that you may have heard is senpai. Senpai is what is called a keigo. Keigo are either suffixes or prefixes that are used when referring to another or are used on nouns. Additionally, keigo is split into three different parts. Sonkeigo, which means respectful language, Kenjogo, which means humble language, and Tenego, which means polite language. Bringing it back, within school and work, two common keigo are senpai and kohai. Senpai refers to someone who is older and more experienced, while kohai refers to someone who is not older and not more experienced. According to Wikipedia, because I'm not Japanese, senpai garner respect from their kohai. They hold more power and control. The point I am trying to make with all of this is that there's a great respect placed on those who are older. Being such an integral part of society and of how they think, you can of course see those thoughts and actions bleed into their stories. It may not always play a major integral part of the story, but it without a doubt has an effect on the character when it comes to treating and reacting to other characters. Another difference of culture that has had a very significant impact on the plot and character is the strong sense of individualism in the West. Beginning with the ancient Greeks, the West had a strong emphasis on self-reliance and mastering one's own destiny. Contrarily, the East had a strong sense of collectivism and working together to accomplish a goal. The results of these differences can be seen in the main cast, or lack thereof. As can be seen through the hero's journey, more on that later, Greek myths focused on one character, the hero, that went on a big journey full of many trials to eventually experience great self-discovery and master one's own fate. Throughout this journey, the hero makes their own choices and gets through most trials with their own strength and ingenuity. Now, it is common to see mentors and other characters that assist the hero, but those characters tend to take a more minor role in the story. In most cases, they simply give advice or give some tool to help the hero, though some characters can be seen to actually give their service and directly help the hero with their task, and sometimes that service may even be the only reason the hero succeeds. Now, on the surface, that does seem like a pretty major role to play, and yes, they do leave a significant impact on the plot. But even then, I would still say they are minor characters. Even when they do play a big part like that, they don't become permanent members of the hero's journey. They are only a part of the story for a short amount of time, once, maybe twice, and even when they are a part of it, they don't really have much individuality or personal goals beyond helping the hero just because. For a great amount of the story, if not most of it, the hero fights and completes their challenges alone. A good example of what I'm trying to say can be seen in the 12 Labors of Hercules. In that story, various stuff happened to the hero, Hercules, which caused him to have to complete 12 very difficult, nigh impossible challenges, or labors. For most of those 12 labors, Hercules had to complete them alone with no assistance. Emphasis on most. For the second labor, Hercules had to slay the Lernaean Hydra, who would grow 2 heads whenever one was cut off. When Hercules couldn't slay the beast and was pushed into a corner, his nephew, Iolaus, came to his rescue, and they worked together by Iolaus cauterizing the heads after Hercules lobbed them off. Now, it is clear that that challenge would have ended in Hercules' defeat if it wasn't for Iolaus, but despite that, he still was very much a minor character. He was Hercules' nephew and wanted to help him, but that's all we know about him. He has no personality or personal goals that don't completely surround the main character. In fact, for Iolaus and many, many other characters in Greek myths, I would go as far to say that it would be more accurate to call him a tool to help the hero instead of, an actual human being. After the second labor, we never even see him again, and because Hercules received his help, he was actually forced to do an additional labor. Also later, we see the goddess Athena give him tools to help him with the task of defeating the Stymphalian birds. But once again, we see no complex personal motive, and we don't see Athena helping for his other tasks. What is the significance of all of this? The big focus is that Hercules takes the one and only spotlight. We don't see a cast full of characters, each with their own motives and arcs. The only motives we see for cooperation with Hercules is either because they just want to help him, or they just really don't like Hera, the antagonist of the story. This is in stark contrast with Eastern stories, which would more likely champion a cast of a few characters that join the hero on the full, or at least most, of the journey. And these characters have their own distinctive motives and desires. Eastern stories were born with a very special trait called nakama. Nakama is a word meaning friend, comrade, or someone you are very close with. Within storytelling, a nakama can be seen as the supporting cast, but unlike the West, these characters are there to stay and they have their own personalities. They are characters that, even if they have different desires, will walk down the same path as the hero. Example time! If you have watched anime, then you have probably at least heard of Naruto. Naruto is a story that follows a magical ninja aptly named Naruto who wants to become the Hokage, the leader of the village he hails from. Now, Naruto has many people who can be classified as being a part of his nakama, but I will only focus on the main two, Sasuke and Sakura. As I mentioned just earlier, Naruto wants to become the Hokage. Sasuke's goals are a bit over the place over the course of the show, but at least in the beginning, he wants to avenge his clan who was slaughtered by his very own brother. And Sakura, she wants to get together with Sasuke. Now, they all clearly want 3 different things, but they all must follow the same path to accomplish those things, the path of becoming strong. Naruto must be strong in order to lead and protect his village. Sasuke must be strong in order to defeat his brother, and Sakura must be strong in order to be by Sasuke's side. Throughout the story, Naruto without a doubt takes the main spotlight, but the supporting characters also have their own plotlines, even detracting the screen time from Naruto to further explore those plotlines. This creates a far more immersive dynamic. The characters feel more real and there's more weight to their actions. And having these different characters with different desires also creates different situations. For example, throughout the majority of the story, Sasuke was doing a whole bunch of crazy stuff. Like trying to kill literally everyone, which understandably caused him to be estranged from the village. That in itself was a whole situation born from different desires, but it also made another conflict of interest between Naruto, who wanted to bring Sasuke back to the light, and the rest of his friends, who thought it best for Sasuke to be killed by their very own hands. The old Western way of individualism was by no means bad, but I do think most stories would benefit to have a solid main cast. If, however, for narrative reasons you would want to put all the focus on one character and one character alone, then I think it is important to take care to make that one character really interesting and compelling through methods such as a really good internal conflict. A big strength of Nakama is being able to bring several layers to a story with many different plotlines and perspectives. That of course means an individualist strategy would have to compensate for the lack of that. But if you do want to take after the old Eastern way, then there's some stuff you have to look out for too. To begin, the characters must work well narratively with one another. This means that the different ways that characters interact with one another must add something special to the story. Whether the hero is forced to face their past, overcome a moral struggle, is guided to a better way of living, etc. These interactions don't need to be identifiably positive or friendly either. For example, you can have two leader-type characters who don't really like each other have a rivalry for control over the team. Having these characters who oppose the others, even if it's in a small way, creates tension and another level of conflict, which just creates more layers to a story, which is usually a good thing. Of course, only if done right. It is also important to make sure that your characters' actions are true to their personality. You should never make them do something that feels unnatural to who they are. Of course, you can have your characters learn, grow, and change throughout the story. In fact, I would highly encourage it. And a changed character can absolutely act differently than how they were from the beginning, though the change should be a gradual process. So, if you want the process to be a bit more quick and dirty, then there needs to be foreshadowing and a clear and believable reason as to why the character would act differently than they normally would. The audience is not stupid, most of the time. If you make a character inconsistent, then they will notice, and it will be incredibly jarring to watch. And finally, it is also important to make each character unique. An excellent example of this is in one of my personal favorite manga/anime, One Punch Man. In One Punch Man, we follow the main character, Saitama, who is about 1,000,000 times stronger than any other character. I'm talking destroying the entire planet with a singular punch kind of strong. In this world, there's severe overpopulation which has caused mankind to cram into big cities numbered A through Z. There are also monsters in this world, which are mostly humans that have turned into monsters through various conditions. Now, Saitama followed his great dream of becoming a hero. For fun, but despite being so strong and saving countless lives, when the story starts, nobody actually knows who he is, though throughout the story more and more people come to realize his strength, and each of them have different reactions to it. We have one become his disciple, one simply respects him, one chooses to give up on his hopes and dreams. One makes him his rival, one finds inspiration to become better and become a hero. One tries to use him to accomplish her own goals, there's one who thinks he should become Saitama's master, and there are many who feel despair, and a lot who are absolutely pulverized. Each and every character Saitama runs into is unique, and thus there are countless amounts of different situations and reactions that are all done very well. The only similarity that can be seen across the board for all their reactions are shock and perhaps some disbelief. Now, imagine if each, or at least most, of the characters all reacted pretty much the same, such as being shocked, then just simply respecting him. And that's it. That would make a much more boring story. And a good example of that can be seen in another anime, Black Clover. Black Clover is a story that takes place in a land where everyone can use magic except for our main character, but he ends up getting a power to nullify magic, so it's all good. The main character, Asta, wants to become the Wizard King, which is pretty much the leader of the kingdom he lives in. Very similar to Naruto, I know. That is yet another thing I will get into later. As Asta goes on his journey, he runs into many people who learn he's magicless and wants to become the Wizard King, and they all react the same. They always go, "What? How could a magicless loser like you ever become the Wizard King?" And that's how it goes. Every single time. And it happens a lot too. Asta is incapable of having peace of mind if he hasn't told every single soul of his dreams. Now, don't get me wrong. Black Clover has some strong points, and I would say that I overall enjoyed watching it. That aspect is just a very prevalent and a very annoying part of it. Many characters find out about Asta in his dreams, yet most of them add absolutely nothing new to the story. Them finding out and their reactions are entirely pointless, and if it's pointless, then it should be put on the chopping block. Moving on, another aspect originating from the East is the trope of the bad guy turning good. Just as it sounds, the villain turns sides and fights alongside the good guys. This is something that can add a very interesting point to the narrative. Back to Naruto, a very common formula for fights is Naruto fights villain, Naruto talks to villain, villain feels bad, villain sacrifices himself as repentance. This formula is a bit simplistic and perhaps a bit overused, and honestly, it isn't all that good, but for reasons I don't have time to get into, so instead, read this. Ignoring Naruto, there are some really good examples of villains turning. One good example is in Pirates of the Caribbean. In it, Captain Barbossa starts out very much as the bad guy, but later an even worse guy shows up. This causes him and our valiant hero, Captain Jack Sparrow, to have to work together to get through the massive conflict. The two will work together, but they will also sacrifice each other if it means surviving or furthering their own personal goal with absolutely no issue whatsoever. In fact, people using each other and sacrificing each other is a very common theme throughout the movies. Well, at least for 1 through 3. I don't actually know if that's true for 4 and 5 because I've never actually seen them, and I never will. Anyways, with Barbossa and Jack doing their own separate scheming and plotting throughout the movie, that just adds another layer of conflict to the story, and it is also a very believable way for the two to team up. And it is essential for pretty much everything in a story to be believable, or you will lose the audience's immersion. Another excellent example of a villain turning can be seen in Avatar: The Last Airbender. If you haven't seen it, then go watch it. Right now. I'm not joking. It is a show that is beyond superb, and also some minor spoilers. But our big bad guy early on in the show is Zuko. Prince Zuko. He is a guy with some pretty major daddy issues. His pops banished him from his home, and the only way to go back and reclaim his honor was by slaying the Avatar, a task perceived to be impossible for 100 years. Zuko hunts down the Avatar, Aang, desperate to capture him, but he goes through many trials and battles within himself, which eventually leads to his legendary redemption arc. He ends up choosing his own destiny instead of accepting the one that was forced upon him by his father. A solid redemption arc is a very good way to turn a bad guy, if done right, and Avatar did it very, very well. Throughout the show, you went on Zuko's journey with him. You feel his pain and struggles, and you want him to change for the better. In order to pull off a redemption arc, you are going to need time and character development. But in the end, the former villain truly will feel like an ally. One last example I would like to get into is for Mob Psycho 100, another great anime/manga that is actually made by the same guy who created One Punch Man. In it, our hero Mob is one of the strongest espers in the world, but despite being so special, he lives by the belief that his powers aren't at all special or even important. Instead, he strives to better himself in other aspects of his life because he knows that without his powers, he is nothing. Now, Mob runs into many other espers who fully rely off of their powers and believe they are some pretty hot stuff. But when these people are absolutely bodied by this middle school brat who doesn't even care about his powers and would gladly trade them for some muscles and social awareness, well, they start to reevaluate what they have been doing with their life. Now, the structure is pretty simple and may look loosely like what is done in Naruto, but the big difference between the two is that for Naruto, all it takes to completely change someone is a few words after smacking them around a bit, then they are immediately giving up their life for the sake of Naruto. For Mob Psycho, however, Mob and the villain have two directly opposing beliefs, and the entire point of the battle is proving who's right, proving which lifestyle the two have led is the correct one to follow. And it isn't immediately after the battle where they fight alongside the hero, usually. Immediately after the battle, they completely lose the will to fight and they begin to think about what it is they have been doing, which causes them to go through their off-screen character arc. This formula works really well for the show because not having to use his powers, especially on others, is a very integral part of Mob's life, and as such it is also a major part of the plot. Whenever Mob wins and is able to change someone, he didn't just avert a crisis. He proved that he is going down the right path, and it makes his beliefs all the more powerful. But that's all, so bye-bye now.